Do you want to create a chart like this one in Excel that you can control with two scroll bars, one for minimum and the other one for maximum? If yes, then you're in the right place. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to create this chart in Excel. Alright, we're going to start from scratch. So I have a dataset over here consisting of two columns, one for names and the other one for commissions. So I want to create a dynamic bar chart that is controlled by two scroll bars, one for minimum and one for maximum. And for doing that, we need three components. First component is two scroll bars. The second component is two helper columns. And the third component is two named formulas. Now, have in mind before you begin, your Excel workbook needs to be saved as a macro-enabled workbook, XLSM, in order to be able to access the developer tab and then create two scroll bars. That said, I'm going to create two scroll bars by going to developer and insert, and here I'm going to select scroll bar form control. I'm going to select it, then I'm going to draw a scroll bar as so, and I'll position it, say, over here, and that's for my min. So just for convenience, I'm going to name these as well. So I'll call this one minimum, and let's position this right over here as so. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing for maximum. So again, I'll go to developer, insert, and I'll click on scroll bar form control, and then I'll draw my second scroll bar as so. And for convenience, I'll also name this one. I'll call it max. And there we have it. We've created our two scroll bars, one for minimum and the other for maximum. Now the next step is right-clicking on each scroll bar and going to Format Control. And here we need to set up the properties of each scroll bar. First of all, we're going to link each scroll bar to a cell. So the minimum scroll bar, in this case, I'll link it to cell O2 as so. As per values, I'll set the minimum value to 0 and I'll set the maximum value as 1000 in this case. Now, as you can see in my data set, all of my data points and all my numbers are below 1000. For that reason, I'm selecting 1000 as the maximum. Now, if your data set consists of numbers which are much higher, you can set a much higher or perhaps a much lower maximum value than this. But based on my data set, I'm selecting 1000. Incremental change. This means the amount of increment every time we click on the scroll bar. I'll set this one at 25, but again, depends on your chart. And that's it. These are the two main values we have to set up. And also we have to link it to the cell, which I've already done. Now I'll click on OK. And now I'm going to do the same thing for maximum. So I'll go to the maximum scroll bar. I'll go to Format Control. And again, I'll set the maximum value as 1000. Once again, the increments at 25. And I'll link this one to cell O4 as so. And I'll click on OK. Now let's see what happens when we click on the scroll bar. There you go. See, this shows it's working. So as I go left and right on this scroll bar, as I click on it, the values in cells O2 and O4 change. And that's exactly what we want. So the first step here is complete. So we've created two scroll bars, one for minimum, one for maximum, and we've linked them to two different cells, and we've configured them as we want them to be configured based on our data set. So that's the first step. The second step is creating two helper columns, and I'll place those two helper columns, in this case, in columns F and G. So I'll call them name and commission. So I'll just copy and paste these two headers right here. So we're going to build these two helper columns based on two formulas. So the formula for the name helper column is currently displayed on the screen. This is a basic filter formula. I will apply it to cell F2, and then I'll briefly explain how it works. So equal sign. There we go. So what this helper column does is it filters column B, that is the name column, based on the values in cells O2 and O4, which we just configured. So as I just explained, we linked the scroll bars to cells O2 and O4. And the filter formula is performing a filter function based on the values in cells O2 and O4. So it's filtering column B whenever column C is both greater and equal to O2 and column C is also smaller or equal to O4. And that's exactly what we want. That's what this filter formula does. And that's how we filter the names. And we're also going to insert a very similar filter formula for our commission. And we're going to put that formula in cell G2. And that formula is currently displayed on the screen right here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this formula right here as so, and there we go. And what these two helper columns are doing is these two helper columns are filtering our data set based on the minimum and maximums which are selected using our scroll bars. So whatever these minimums and maximums are set to in the scroll bar, that's the data that's going to be shown in our helper columns. And that's exactly what we want. And that being said, step 2 is also complete. Now let's move on to the last step before we actually create our bar chart. The last step consists of creating 2 dynamic named formulas. And in order to create those 2 named formulas, we have to go to Formulas in the ribbon and click on Name Manager. And here, this page pops up and we have to click on New. First, we need to create a named formula for our names column. And I'll call that named formula Dynamic Names. And the formula we have to enter for dynamic names is currently displayed on the screen. So it's an offset formula. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the formula in the refers to section in the very bottom, as so. Now what this formula does is this formula grabs all the names listed in column F and it ignores the header and the blank. So that's what this -1 at the tail end is doing. This way, as names are added or deleted, the range updates on its own. Now, if you want to learn more about how this formula works, I invite you to visit my other tutorial on how to create dynamic charts. And the link to that is available in the description box. So once I copy and paste this formula, I'll go ahead and click on OK, as so. So we created our first name formula. The next step is create the second name formula, this time for commission. So once again, we go to Formulas in the ribbon, we click on Name Manager, we click on New, and the second name formula is for a commission, so I'll call it Dynamic Commission, as so. And the formula for Dynamic Commission is currently displayed on the screen over here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the formula. There we go. So it's very similar to the named formula for dynamic names. Again, if you want to learn more about how this formula works, refer to my other YouTube video. The link is available in the description box. And then I'll go ahead and click on OK, as so. So we performed all 3 steps. So we created our scroll bars, one for minimum and one for maximum. We linked them correctly. We created our 2 helper columns, which are filter formulas. And we also created our 2 named formulas via Name Manager. So now that we've performed the main 3 steps, the last part is to create the bar chart. So to do that, I'll go to the ribbon, I'll go to Insert, and I'll select the desired chart, which in this case is this bar chart over here. I will right click on the bar chart, go to Select Data, and this page over here appears. On this page, on the Legend Entry section, I'll click on Add. And in the series name, I'll put Commission from my helper column. And on the series values, I'll click on this symbol over here. And now you have to left click on any given cell in your sheet. It could be any cell on the worksheet. So I'll left click on a random cell. And now you have to delete everything that comes after the exclamation mark, as so. So delete everything that comes after the exclamation mark. And immediately after the exclamation mark, you need to type the name of the named formula that you created in step 3. So it's going to be Dynamic Commission. There we go. And I'll click on OK. So we're almost done. The chart is created. Now the next step is to also edit the horizontal axis. And we're going to do the exact same thing in the horizontal axis. And to do that, I'm going to click on this edit button over here. And I'm going to left click. Then I'm going to select Arrange. So I'll click on this symbol over here. Now we need to select any given cell in this worksheet. It could be any random cell. So I'll click this cell, and then we need to delete everything that comes after the exclamation mark, as so. And immediately after the exclamation mark, we need to type the name of the named formula for names, which in this case is Dynamic Names. There we go. And we'll click on OK, and OK again. And we're pretty much all done now. So let's just polish this a little bit, make it look a little bit more appealing. And I will also add data labels as so. And there we go. And let's also make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So we are all done. Now let's put this to test. Let's revise the values in our scroll bars. Let's play around with the scroll bars a little bit. There we go. So as you can see, every time I go left, every time I revise the scroll bar, this bar chart updates. And let's do the same thing with the maximum. So we reduce the maximum. Because same thing's happening, only the data points that fall between the minimum and maximum are showing. And this is all being done using our two helper columns and our two named formulas. So all these components are working together to help make this happen. And you can see this is very convenient, and it really helps us be able to control and manipulate this bar chart using these two scroll bars. You can see, very convenient, and it can expand and collapse. And in this way, you can only include those data points that you want in your bar chart based on minimum and maximum values, which are selected via your scroll bars. And that's how it's done. And this is a very neat tool, and it's very convenient, and it will definitely add lots of value to your Excel workbook. And users are going to love working with something like this, as it's very convenient and adds lots of business value to what you're doing with Excel. I hope you found this video useful and got some value out of it. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Also, if you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe and also turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future videos. See you soon.